We live in a world of rejection. Now, the cause of rejection, or the reason why it's there, is because rejection being, and we look a little later at what it can be and what really the substance of rejection is, rejection attaches to parts of our nature that desires love, acceptance, and self-worth. Rejection attaches itself to parts of our nature, the very primary parts, the parts that are most important, where we need love. Rejection will see to it that it gets in there and it puts a wall of defenses around love being accepted and self-worth being realized in the life. But nevertheless, this is the general pattern. It is first of all abandonment, a sense of awareness of some type of abandonment to the individual. This in turn leads to the feeling, a strong feeling of rejection. This in turn leads to a real sense of low self-worth or low self-esteem, where I feel I'm really valueless. This in turn leads to fear, because there's an awful fear of being rejected. There's a fear that somebody will find out that I'm not as good as what they think I am. This in turn leads to insecurity, where the person has no sense of security, because after all, God is essentially gone, the relationships are broken, and so this primary spirit, this rejection thing, will see to it that these other events, they draw. It's like a huge magnet. And while rejection can be an experience that we have, it can also be a spirit. And if it is a spirit, what it does is it draws the individual in whom rejection is settled down. What it does is it draws them into these various scenarios, and it will cause these experiences and these feelings to come in order to gather more spirits. And so the person becomes, as it were, a magnet to these things happening in their lives, a deep sense of insecurity. That in turn leads to grudges. It leads to unforgiveness because of what people have done. It leads to self-pity, because why is this happening to me? In turn leads to pride, because we try desperately to assert ourselves and try and get ourselves sorted out and be what we ought to be. Arrogance, anger, rebellion, paranoia, all these things flow from rejection. Rebellion is, and the reason why a person is rebellious or a child rebellious, is that they are rejecting those who have rejected them. They can't be controlled because of the anger that is in them, because of rejection. There's a tendency in a person with rebellion or rejection to reject other people. Now, the reasoning again behind this is because they are careful and aware that they've been rejected. So the risk is, if I open up to people, they'll reject me again. So I don't want to do that. What I'll do is I'll be very careful with other people, and I'll reject them before they get to reject me. You generally find that as a result, they have very few friends. Friendship is a problem because of the fear of rejection. You often find a person with rejection has a deep inability to be corrected or to receive even constructive criticism. They react way above other people. And this, again, is a reactionary behavior. It's not that they want to do that. It's because that their identity is set in being right. If they get things sorted out in their mind that they have everything right, then that's their identity. I've got everything right. But if you come along and say that's wrong, then their identity is completely challenged and undermined, and they collapse into rejection. Whereas a person who doesn't have rejection, what they will do is they will say, all right, that's interesting. Must go home and think about that. That's the difference. It is a reaction to rejection. The Bible tells us of Jeremiah, the Lord said, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. In other words, the general consensus of the church is that when a child is conceived in the womb, that at the moment of conception, God imparts an eternal spirit. So the child is not a blob of cells. There is a spirit there. And it is not the brain that is discerning what's going on, for the brain hasn't formed, but the spirit can sense. That little embryo, they call it, that little formation has a spirit that can sense things. Now, I'm not going to go into any detail, but only I have witnessed things in ministry over the years, over ladies that were prayed with regarding maybe abortion, that I wouldn't have believed this. But I believe it completely. That the spirit of the child at conception is there, and the spirit can sense, read, and feel everything. And so out of conception, through rape, an unwanted pregnancy, when a child is forming in the womb, and for whatever reason the parents don't want it, maybe it's they weren't married or something, and say, we don't want this, the child knows. And the child becomes afraid in the womb. The child listens to the conversation. It can sense what's going on, because its spirit can read that. It is often perpetrated, as I said many times, without the desire to do it, by those whom we love and respect, authority figures, parents, teachers, peers, and friends. And so there's that. There's gender disappointment. People say, I wanted a girl, but a boy came along. I wanted a boy, and a girl came along. The child senses it. It's aware that it's a reject. It's aware that there was something about it that wasn't good, that the parents weren't accepting it. These things do come up in prayer with adults when you pray with them. The adoption, whenever a child is, for whatever reason, adopted and let go, the spirit of the child is aware that it has been rejected. The child becomes aware that mom and dad don't want me. And the child senses, and the rejection sets in on the child. What's the antidote as we come to the close? Well, the antidote is found in Ephesians 3:19, that ye might know the love of Christ, that passeth knowledge. You can know the love of Christ.